congratulations, first of all, on the Golden Globe Award. I should imagine you're really chuffed.
Oh, well, yeah, it's marvellous. I haven't won an award in years, so it helped.
Why do you think the film appeals so much to the Americans?
Well, I think it appeals to anybody, anywhere, because it's got a very, very human theme. That's all it is. And although it seems parochial with an English professor and a girl from Liverpool, it applies to any country, anywhere in the world. And they saw that immediately. Plus, of course, it's got a very, if you think in terms of America, it's got a very strong feminist theme. And I always thought it would go in America because of that.
And it's a fairly simple, straightforward story,
It's
too,
a straightforward story, and funnily enough, they laugh, the audience is there laugh in exactly the same places as they do in England. They understand everything that's going on.
There's a smashing clip that we saw, but in it you play this, I suppose you could call it an alcoholic, disillusioned professor. Was that a difficult enough role to play?
No, not really. No, I've been drunk a couple of times. I've had quite a lot of research into it. I mean, I was really only ever drunk really once, really drunk as this guy gets in the movie, and that was the day I got demobbed from the army. But that was 30 years ago. But sense memory always works with actors.
Although, mind you, I remember talking to a comedian who does a very good drunk act, and he was saying that it's quite difficult sometimes to do that drunken thing when you're acting it.
Well, the difficulty is that if you think in terms of an actor would think straightforward and say, well, now I'm going to play a drunk, so I'm going to play a man who's walking crooked and is talking in a slurred manner. In actual fact, if you really think of it, a drunk is a man who is trying to walk straight and trying to speak properly. Yes. So there you've got to go right through and come out the other side. It's a bit like talking to yourself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, apart from any research that you might have done in your own alcoholic days or whatever, I mean, who did you base the role in The Professor
Well, there are two people. The character is based on two people. One is a very close friend of mine who was a professor, who's a writer called Robert Bolt, who wrote A Man for All Seasons, and the drunk part was based on my friend and partner Peter Langan from Langan's Brasserie. I had a lot of experience with him, and because he's always bummed out of his mind all day long.
Does he know that you based the character on
Yeah,
him?
but the minute, when he came back, he saw the film. He said, "You based it on me."
And he's still speaking to you?
Oh, sure, he speaks to me with a slurred voice, trying to speak properly.
Now, in educating Rita, it was Julie Walters' first role, so first movie part. So in some ways, was it a bit like you educating Julie?
Not really, because Julie had already done this part in the theatre for a long time, over a year, I'm sure, and she was very experienced in television, so she didn't really need teaching very much, and I didn't really teach her anything. The thing to do is just with someone who's in their first film, on the first days, obviously you're going to be a bit nervous. And so the other person can make life very difficult for you, and that's the only way that I helped her at all, because I don't get nervous.
Never?
No, my attitude is this, is that I used to be nervous when I was young, and I had one line in a picture, I'd always forget it. You know, I mean, I remember being in a film where I had two lines, and I forgot them both. And the director said to me, "I will see that you never work again." And he has never worked since. But when my view of it is like, for instance, people say, "Are you nervous doing a talk show like this?" You know, and I always say, "Well, no, they're not paying me and they can't fire me, so what am I nervous about?" Whereas on a movie, if you're the star of the show, you make sure you make everyone else nervous, so because they can't fire you, and you're the star of it. So I don't get nervous, and if I do anything, what do you get nervous about? Young actors get nervous about doing something wrong, you know, forgetting a line, upsetting someone. All you do is you're going to do it again. And it's very, very simple. In a movie, it's very easy. You just do it again. So I never get nervous.
Although I was visualising Julie, say, in Hollywood for her first movie premiere and all that kind of razzmatazz. That must be totally new.
Now, I think she got nervous there, because I watched, because I tried to warn her, but you never can, that I could see that she was going to be a massive success in America, which indeed she was. And I tried to warn her just how much of a whirlwind it was going to be. And she took notice and listened to me, but she didn't really, I obviously didn't build it up enough, because it was really a whirlwind. But she did a marvelous job, because she hosted the Hollywood Golden Globes and did a wonderful job on it. I was amazed. But you see, she's not a new kid or anything. She's a really seasoned professional, and she knows what she's doing.
Well, taking your title from the movie, The Professor, I was just mentioning in the link that as a kid you were known as The Professor as well. How did you get that nickname?
Well, I have a very good memory, you see, and I grew up in South London. A lot of guys couldn't even read or write, you know, let alone have a good memory for anything. They didn't know anything to remember. And so when... And so whenever there was an argument, it was always would go to me, and I would settle the argument. Whatever I said, the guy won the bet, because I just have this memory that remembers a load of rubbish. Actually, I can't remember anything important, but trivia I remember all of it. It's dreadful.
What, just all this useless information?
Oh, masses of it. Yeah.
Like what?
No, the first flight of an airplane was the Wright brothers, the Kitty Hawk, right? It's the first time an airplane ever left the ground. And the flight of that airplane was shorter and lower than the length and the height of a Boeing 747.
Now, not a lot of people know that.
And not a lot of people know that. Not a lot of people want to know that.
Because that little phrase really developed up, didn't it, attached to you?
Peter Sellers did that to me. I mean, he said, because over a period of years, obviously, I was very close friends with Peter Sellers, and over a period of years, I would come up with something, and always at the end of it, you said, well, not many people know that. And he picked up on this, and then he did an act on it. And then one day I telephoned him, and his telephone answering machine answered, and it was my voice. He had imitated me. And he says, Peter Sellers is my name. I can do his impression of me, which is, my name is Michael Caine, and Peter Sellers is out at the moment. Not many people know that. That's what I'm saying. Peter, I'll call you back. That's it.
Lovely. You're obviously very proud of your Bermondsey upbringing and this whole London connection. What was so special about your upbringing in that part of the city?
Well, I remember always, everyone I grew up with was funny. Everybody was funny. It was always amusing. And I think it's because you grow up in a rather hard sort of world, and you're always sort of backs to the wall. And you see the amusing side of everything. I always saw the amusing side of everything. And I also think it toughens you up a little bit for life later. I mean, it prepared me very well for backs to the wall in Hollywood, I'll tell you. Right. And I enjoyed my life in London and with the lads that I grew up with. And I've always kept my accent and my origins very much to the fore, almost to the point of boredom sometimes. But that's based on knowing myself and looking at actors when I was a kid and thinking, God, none of them are like me, none of them speak like me, and I want to be an actor, and I'll never... None of them have got Cockney accents, and that turned out that I was right to do that, because I just made a picture, honorary consul, with Bob Hoskins, and he told me he became an actor because he saw me on television, and he said, well, if he can do it talking like that, so can I. It's true. And then I went and saw Twiggy in my one and only in New York about 6 months ago. And I went backstage to tell her how much I loved it, because she is fabulous.
I believe she's brilliant.
Oh, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And she said, you know why I became an actress? I said, why? She said, because of you. She said, because I thought, if he can do it with his accent, I can do it. And I get it, you see. And so I keep it, because people are always, when you're working class, and especially in this country with the class thing, and you've got an accent, you say, I'm going to be an actor. People say, who do you think you are with your voice? What are you going to do? You know, you say, I'm going on the stage, and they say very witty lines. What are you going to do? Sweep it up and all that. And you go through all those cliches, you know? Right. And people don't encourage the young to get out of their thing, which is why I've always gone on, as I am now, which I told you I was a bore about the subject, it is for kids who are working class not to take any notice of anybody who says you can't do it, because you can.
Because when you were growing up, I mean, your father worked part of the time anyway at the fish market, and you were around a fish porter, was he?
Yeah, he was. My family have been Billingsgate fish market porters since the market opened, which was about 300 years ago. Now they moved it to the Isle of Dogs. I wonder what sort of fish they're going to sell.
Mind you, I mean, at that stage, did you have any big movie heroes of your own? I mean, people that you went along to the flicks to idolise? Yeah,
my heroes were Spencer Tracy and Humphrey Bogart. Because they seemed to come from... They always played sort of working class They had working class backgrounds because British pictures in those days were always made from plays and cast from the West End, you know, and it was always very much French window type things. Everybody leaping through windows saying Bunty's having a party and things like that. And I couldn't find my niche in there anywhere. I was beginning to get a bit worried. I was going to try and fit in as Lord Ponsonby or something. You know?
So did you ever go autograph hunting or sending away
I did
for any
once.
of these?
I sent away for an autograph to Humphrey Bogart, and I got one back, and I showed it to all the lads, and I said, they do. He said, Dave only sent it. That's not his autograph. He said, it's printed. And I went like that, and I went, no, it isn't. And I smudged the autograph like that. It was all pen. He'd really signed it. And many years later, I became very close friends with Betty Bacall, Lauren Bacall, his wife, and she said he always signed them, and he signed them himself. But I threw it away because it was ruined.
Well, when we move ahead to your first movie, to Zulu, now you were saying how proud you are of your Cockney accent, and yet you didn't really get the Cockney role in that film.
No, I was up for the Cockney role. So I was in a play in the West End called Next Time I'll Sing to You, and Stanley Baker and Cy Enfield, who were producing and directing the picture, came and saw the play, and I was playing the Cockney, and I went, they said, come and audition for Cy, and it was in the bar at the bottom of the Prince of Wales Theatre, and I went down there, and Cy said to me, so I'm sorry to have brought you over here, he said, because we've given the Cockney part to James Booth. So I said, well, that's okay. I was used to, not getting parts. I'd been an actor for 11 years, and I'd been in 2 movies, I think, with 1 line in each. As a matter of fact, I was going to play an Irish gangster in one thing, and I did my Irish accent, and the guy says, you better play it deaf and dumb. So I played this deaf and dumb Irishman. I don't know how they knew. I think they kept calling me Pat.
I wonder why.
So I'm walking out of the bar, and the bar is... I always think my career is based on the length of the bar at the Prince of Wales, because it's a very long bar. It's right along there, and I just got to the door, and Cy Enfield said to me, he said, can you speak proper English? And I said, yes. And he went back, and I did a screen test, and I got the part of Lieutenant Bromhead in Zulu. And I thought I'd got it absolutely perfect, Lieutenant Bromhead. And at the first night of the movie, there were 52 of his relations there. There were 52 Bromheads there. And one by one, each one of them came up to me and whispered, you do know it's Bromhead, not Bromhead. Because that thing,
Yes.
it's just to catch out people who don't know what they're doing, like me.
So how did you actually discover then, when you did your test and everything, that you had got a role in the film after all, despite the fact that the Cockney part had gone?
I did a screen test, and then I was at a party on a Saturday night, and the director was there. And he ignored me the entire evening, so I thought, well, I haven't got it, because I knew he'd seen the test. And he was really sadistic, Si, about it. He left it all evening, and just as he was leaving, he said, by the way, he said, I saw your test. He said, it's the worst test I've ever seen on anybody. He said, but you got the part because we can't find anybody else. He said, you leave for South Africa Monday. This is Saturday
Does the ego
night.
an awful lot of good, that kind of statement, doesn't it?
He kept me right down.
On the other hand, if we look at the Upcrest file, I mean, there you had a spy character. And, I mean, what a name to call a spy, Harry.
We were sitting round, there was the producer's name was Harry Saltzman, who's one of the men who did the Bond films. And and we were sitting in his room, and in his drawing room in the country, and he said, the character had no name in the book. So he said, we've got to have a name that doesn't mean anything, a really ordinary, stupid name. And without thinking, I said, Harry. And he said, oh, thanks very much. So we called him Harry, and we thought, well, what's a name that doesn't really mean anything? Palmer is the name that doesn't mean anything. Palmer, so we called him Harry Palmer. And that's why he was called that.
And he really was the opposite, wasn't he, of 007?
Well, he was the opposite of Bond. He was a bungler. He wore glasses. Also, he did cooking as well. I mean, I remember when the film came out, everybody said, people might think it's a bit feminine to do cooking, but women liked the idea because you'd never seen a man cook a meal for a woman in a picture before. You know that? And women found that very, very attractive. It was quite strange.
Would they call the role what, like 00?
3.5.
003.5.
That's half the reviews I got were 003.5. Yeah.
Which I thought was lovely. But if you look at the lifestyle that you were having parallel to a film like that, you know, you were living in this flat with Terence Stamp, presumably doing the cooking there as well, were you?
Yeah, when Terence and I first met, we were both broke, and I had mastered one of the cheapest and most nourishing dishes, which was egg custard. I could do a great egg custard because milk and eggs, you know, you keep going all day long on that. And he had a rich girlfriend who lived opposite, and she used to slip steaks through the letterbox. It's true. So, you know, we used to hear the post. The letterbox would go. We'd go running down. They'd say, "Oh, it's only letters." And no steaks. The letters were all bills. So we used to leave the letters.
But your contemporaries were people like Albert Finney and Peter O'Toole and, of course, Terence Stamp. And, and when you look back on the 60s, I mean, a fairly raucous time, I think we could imagine.
Yeah, but the thing about the 60s was that everybody was unknown, and day after day, everyone you knew became famous. I was the last one. I became famous about 1975. I left the 60s a bit late. But everybody, even like painters. I remember there was a writer called, an actor called David Barron, and he said to me, he said, "Oh, the hell with this, I'm going to turn it in." He wasn't making it as an actor. So he said, "I'm going to write." So I said, "Oh, well, yeah, that would be great." And he said, "I'm going to write under my real name." I said, "What's your real name?" He said, "Harold Pinter." And then there was another guy who just left Maudie Edwards' repertory company in Swansea, and he said, "I'm going to turn this in." It was a very hard life, you know. He said, "I've started writing," and I said, "What you write?" He said, "I'm writing a play called Look Back in Anger."
It's amazing, isn't it?
I mean, they were all actors, incredible, and everywhere you looked, there was somebody. I mean, I remember being in Liverpool in the theatre, in the new Shakespeare Theatre in Liverpool with Sam Wanamaker's company. I was in a company there with Robert Shaw was one of the other actors in that company, and we used to go and have coffee in the cavern with these boys banging out tunes, which is the Beatles. And then Charles Lawton came through with an unknown guy in a play which was on its way to London, and it was Albert Finney. It's quite amazing. That's everywhere terrific. You looked, there was someone came, and you knew they were going to. You actually knew they were going to.
Well, now, those are obviously some of the male personalities or stars, if you like, that you're associated with. But you've also had a great eye for very beautiful, talented ladies over the years, and none more so than your wife. But the thing is that you actually fell in love with her, didn't you, before you knew her or met her? Yeah,
I stayed in one night with a mate of mine, and I said, "Look, let's not go out, let's have a quiet evening." So I did a fry-up, you know, in the kitchen, you know, sausage, bacon, egg and tomatoes, and we sat and watched television. And then on came a commercial for Maxwell House Coffee with this beautiful girl in it, and it was in Brazil, from Brazil. So I said, "Right," I said, "go home, get some stuff, we're going to Brazil tomorrow, I'm going to find this girl."
You didn't actually go, did you?
No, we were going, and then I met a guy, and he said, we decided to go out and just have a drink in a club. And I'm sitting in the club, and the guy came in, and he said to me, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to Brazil tomorrow." Oh, he said, "You got a job?" I said, "No." I said, I said, "I saw a girl on the television tonight in the Maxwell House Coffee." He said, "Wait a minute." He said, "I was watching television tonight." He said, "I've just come out." He said, "The Maxwell House where the girl dances with the beans and everything." So I said, "Yeah." So he said, "I know her. She lives in the Fulham Road." So I got in touch with her and married her.
That was a good idea.
Yeah.
Saved all that money going to Brazil.
Yeah, that was 13 years ago, yeah.
And then you went on to make a film, didn't you, with Sean Connery and Shakira?
Yeah, we made a film called The Man Who Would Be King in Morocco, and the girl who was playing the princess sort of fell out of the film for, I don't know what reason. And we were all sitting at dinner, and John Huston is saying, "No, we've got to find an Indian princess from somewhere. Where can we find it?" And everybody's eyes turned to my wife, who is Indian. And she's eating away and not taking any notice, and suddenly she looks up, and everybody's staring at her, and she's never acted. She said, I'm not playing the Indian princess. But Houston talked her into it, and she did a very good job of it, and never wanted to act again. But I tell you the great advantage that I have over a lot of men in a marriage is my wife has done my job.
Yeah.
And she knows. So when I come home and I suddenly say, she said, what's it been like? She knows what it's like to make a film. And she had a very hard time on it herself. And so she understands. And that, if it was at all possible for everybody to have a wife who could do their job, I don't know how coal miners would get on, but... Mind you, in America, they have lady coal miners now.
Do they?
Yeah, the women do everything in America now. Except the washing up.
Well, I'll not pursue that one.
No, no, it's the old Henny Youngman gag. He said, I said to my wife, where do you want to go for your holidays? And she said, I want to go somewhere where I've never been before. He said, we spent 2 weeks in the kitchen.